Hello and welcome to this edition of Consciousness Raising Online. Um, Apparently I got some technical issues going on, so I can't see or hear exactly what I'm doing, so I'm just going to go through this, and it's being recorded anyway, so we'll get it straight. But I want to talk about two Texas towns and two Texas tragedies, and one of them resulted in 13 black men being hanged the same day. Yeah, that's how deep this is. The first occurred in 1906 in a little town called Brownsville. Now, for years, I have seen or heard people mention Brownsville and getting it confused with Bronzeville, which is a nickname for a neighborhood in Chicago, and there's a few other places, like in Milwaukee. They also have a area they call Bronzeville, as in bronze, Bronze. But this is Brownsville. In fact, it's named after somebody named Brown. But I put this map up here because I want you, first of all, to get this in your mind, a picture of where Brownsville is. And if you notice, it's right at the tip of Texas meet Mexico. And since in reality we know that that used to be Mexico anyway, Texas, and it's right there at the tip. So that's the first thing. This is 1906. I want you to get this in mind. 1906. Little town called Brownsville. Okay? And in this little town called Brownsville, some things went on. Let's take a look at a couple of things. Documentations. What occurred is that they sent I guess a regiment of Buffalo soldiers down there to Brownsville, and apparently this place was real well. Prejudice as many of these towns go. Okay, and some stuff jumped off, and of course the Buffalo soldiers got blamed for it. The black folks blamed the black men. But what happened is ugly. You see there, it says the Texas mystery that died unsolved, August 13, 1906. Here, the hidden history of Brownsville, and you know a lot of our history is hidden. But they call it the Brownsville Affair, the Brownsville Riot, and other things, right? Here's what I want to do. I want to run this short video that'll give you a little bit of a picture, and then I'll go into it a little bit more in depth so you can get the crux of this. Okay, and it's just music underneath, and no. Okay, they arrived at Fort Brown. Immediately after their arrival, the soldiers began experiencing racism from the white population. When a white woman had reportedly been attacked on August 12, 1906, a curfew was placed specifically on the regiment. not allowing them to leave the base after sunset. The following night, a white bartender and a Latino police officer was shot. This is 1906. They were probably still Mexican. Despite the commanders at Fort Brown accounting that all the soldiers were at the base, Brownsville's white community accused the soldiers of both incidents, going so far as to plant evidence. This ultimately left to President Theodore Roosevelt dishonorably discharging all 167 soldiers of the unit, and all across the country, black folks was mad. They were very upset, including Booker T and W.E.B. Right? So, and they talked to Roosevelt, but he didn't care. 1970, all the way to 1970, the guy wrote a book and argued that the soldiers were discharged without due process. The Defense Department finally reinvestigated the incident, and they were eventually pardoned by President Nixon and awarded an honorable discharge without back pay. But by this point, all but two of the men had already passed away, and eventually what happened was that there was only one by the time they got down to wanting to give them any kind of reparations. So one soldier who was still alive at that point, he got $25,000. That was it. You notice how when they give us, now it's 100 years later, they're going to give them an honorable discharge. They're all dead. And their family don't get none of the benefits still. See, because that's part of the discharge honorably is there's benefits to go with it. So to give them a posthumous honorable discharge, it don't mean nothing if it ain't got no benefits with it. Here's an example of what the press was saying back then. Negro soldiers on a rampage. Brief reign of terror in which white man is killed and others injured. Now listen to this. Woman is roughly handled, and she claims attack was made by one of the Negro soldiers. Citizens are greatly aroused. That stuff reads so weird, don't it? Let's read this even more. Okay, Brownsville, Texas, August 14th. Last evening, Mrs. Leon Evans was attacked at her home by a Negro and very roughly handled. She asserted that a Negro soldier was the assailant, and an effort was made to apprehend him. A company of blacks has recently been stationed at Fort Brown and have been obnoxious to the citizens. Interestingly, they called a Negro one thing, and then they say a company of blacks. After the search, a band of these Negroes, back to being Negroes again, came from the fort to the town. They fired several volleys down Main Street. 23 shots entered the residence of Lewis R. Cowan, and many went through the residence of F.E. Stark. Policeman Joe Domingue had his arm and hand shattered and his horse killed under him. Frank Natus, a barkeeper at the Ruby Saloon, was killed. A Craig Jorgensen bullet passed through his heart. Really? A couple of bricks were shot out of the wall of the Miller Hotel near a window where guests were sleeping. After leaving the garrison, the Negroes took a direct course up the alley back of Elizabeth Street. Representations have been made to the governor and a request that the Negroes be moved away immediately to save trouble. Companies B, C, and D of the 25th Infantry are stationed at Fort Brown. Now that was that's a deep article, wasn't it? Now, this part about Roosevelt, it was national at that time, the equivalent of national news, that he had dishonorably discharged all of that company, the 167 soldiers. There's a very famous cartoon. This is the cartoon here. I believe in a square deal every time when he's talking to civilian black people. But he says, I don't care how long and honorable any of your records are, you're all discharged, get out. And you have to understand that put a big hurting on the community. Okay? And they took them to 1970 before they even addressed it correctly. All right, that's a major, major, major deal. Okay? And that was in Brownsville. So I want you to understand that, so that will never be misunderstood or misrepresented as Bronzeville, at least not around you. You'll be able to say, no, it was Brownsville, the color, not Bronzeville as in the metal. Okay? Now, that was in 1906. Now let's move forward to 1917. And this time we're in Houston. Now this is only 11 years later, right? 1906 to 1917. And look at where Houston is. It's right there almost on in the Gulf itself. Very close to Louisiana. Houston, I got relatives and stuff in Houston. A lot of us do. So what happened in Houston? He called it the Houston riots. What? Well, let's look at some things. There was a place there called Camp Logan. As you look at some of these pictures, I want you just to focus on these pictures for a minute. Ooh, 1917. Remember, we got to always remember the years involved, the era and everything. So this 1917. There's a brother with that rifle. And remember, it's only 11 years after the incident in Brownsville. And so now you got a whole bunch of new soldiers who've been sent to Houston. Now this was apparently a training facility. Okay? And this black battalion, I guess, the 24th, they get sent down there to Camp Logan. And what do you think happened? As soon as they get there, the townspeople, they're racist, and they start mistreating them. Okay? Now I'm going to read you this. Let's read this here. Because this is ugly here. You thought the other one was ugly. This is uglier. On December 11th, 1917, 13 black soldiers were hanged for their part in a little remembered and deadly race riot. They were condemned to death after a trial many called unjust. Now, at a moment when the continuing impact of racism in policing and criminal justice is a topic of fraught public conversation throughout the United States, we're talking about now, relatives on both sides of that Houston riot are uniting to preserve the memory of the event and to find some justice for those executed soldiers. Well, excuse me, but since they were hanged, they're dead. How can you get justice for them once they're dead? It began in July 1917, following America declaring war on Germany and entering World War I. The 3rd Battalion of the 24th United States Infantry, a predominantly black unit, was sent to guard the construction of Camp Logan, part of the new war effort on the edge of Houston. From the beginning, the soldiers encountered Jim Crow law and racism from police and civilians. Workers constructing the camp resented their presence. They sent these soldiers into the most hostile environment imaginable, said Charles Anderson, a relative of Sergeant William Nesbitt, one of the hanged soldiers. The soldiers should have never been sent there. They should have remained at their base in New Mexico until the order came to go to France. Now, these photos up here above are actually soldiers who were given life sentences. But I want you to see this. This is Nesbitt, one of the soldiers who was hanged. Okay? I want you to see his face and understand they were soldiers. Okay? Tensions mounted until around noon on August 23rd, when the Houston police arrested a black soldier for allegedly interfering in the arrest of a black woman, triggering a rapid escalation of events, leading to false rumors reaching Camp Logan by evening that a soldier had been killed and that a white mob was approaching the camp. Now, once that occurred, let's see what happened. All right. Soldiers grabbed rifles and headed into downtown Houston against the orders of their superior officers. The rampage lasted 2 hours and involved gun battles between the soldiers and the police and local residents, with bayonets being used, leaving 16 white locals dead, including 5 policemen, and 4 black soldiers also died. Think about this. Look at this. 16 white locals, including 5 police, are dead, and 4 black soldiers also died. After tempers finally cooled, the soldiers returned to camp. The next day, martial law was declared in Houston, and the following day, the unit was dispatched back to New Mexico before 3 court-martials were convened to try 118 indicted soldiers. 64 men were tried in San Antonio, charged with disobeying orders, mutiny, murder, and aggravated assault during the first court-martial that began November 1st, the largest murder trial in U.S. military history, resulting in the 13 death sentences. They were represented by just 1 lawyer and didn't even have a chance to appeal, says Angela Holder, great niece of Corporal Jesse Moore, one of the hanged soldiers, and a history professor at Houston Community College. They were denied due process guaranteed by the Constitution. Not one Houstonian among the prosecution witnesses could identify a soldier as having fired shots to kill someone, while routinely referring to the accused using the N-word, that being nigger, that's what the word was. 7 soldiers agreed to testify against the others in exchange for clemency. On November 28th, the 13 were found guilty and sentenced to death, and 2 weeks later, without an appeal, they were hanged on December 11th. All 13 hanged in one day. The young man on the right, that's Corporal Jesse Moore, who's we just read about the relative, is a history teacher. I want to put this map up here right quick. This just shows a little bit of what went on. um, showing where allegedly people were killed, and how these soldiers came down there and they kicked some butt. They had to. They killed 16 of the locals, including 5 police. They were not to be messed with. Now remember, this is 11 years after the other incident in Brownsville. So they all knew about Brownsville, so they knew at the very least they were going to get dishonorably discharged. But they knew when they killed some white people, that some folks was going to have to get the death penalty. Here's a newspaper from the day. 16 dead, 22 injured from riot. Many Negroes rounded up, more than 100 still at large. This is interesting. The Illinois National Guard, the police and civilians searching for them. The leader is killed. Negro troops to be moved from Houston. Now, I looked into this to find out why was the Illinois National Guard involved. But apparently the Illinois National Guard was down there as a part of all these different troops that were there for training at Camp Logan. Okay. You see it says city under martial law. Troops who mutinied to be removed. One Negro soldier tells what precipitated the riot. But I got to show you this. This almost slipped past me. All right, I want you to look down at the very bottom in the middle. You see what it says? It says, police. What did it say? I'll let you see it for yourself. Right in the middle at the bottom. It says, policemen pursue boatload of Negroes. A boatload of Negroes. How many Negroes is that? A boatload. But it just goes to show you how, it sounded like a lynch mob, because that's what it was. But this is what originally got me started on this years back. I came across this photograph. And this photograph got to me so badly because when I first saw it, I said, wait, is this real? Is this true? Listen what it said. Largest murder trial in the history of the United States, seen during court-martial of 64 members of the 24th Infantry on trial for mutiny and murder of 17 people at Houston. I don't know what that word is. August 23rd, 1917. Trial started November 1st, and prisoners are guarded by the 19th Infantry, and blah, blah, blah. But when I saw this photograph, I said, wait a minute. This is a trial? This is a court-martial? And look at this. They had 3 different court-martials. This is just one. This was the largest one. 64 soldiers, black men. Look at them. They're all corralled over there. And remember what it said? They all had one lawyer. And of course, they found them all guilty. 13 were given death sentences. Some of the others were given life sentences. These are some of the ones that got life sentences. And many of the others were just kicked out. Or got other, they didn't get life sentences. They might have got, shorter time frames. But can you imagine? This was a huge mess. They grabbed up all them brothers and took them, like I say, 3 different court martials. So the largest was 64, another one had 20, and another one had so many. Altogether, 118 black men in the military. And they said, apparently they said, no, we ain't taking this stuff. So, let me see, here's the last part. It says, this was a problem created by community policing in a hostile environment, says Paul Matthews, founder of Houston's Buffalo Soldiers National Museum, which examines the role of African American soldiers during U.S. military history. The soldiers were standing up for America when it wasn't standing up for them. And the caption on this photograph says, in 2017, 2 new headstones were placed at graves in Houston's College Memorial Park Cemetery for 2 soldiers killed during the riot. The graves had previously been unmarked. A similar perspective is shared by some relatives of those who suffered because of the rioting soldiers. The soldiers were 100% wrong for rioting, but I don't blame them, said Jules James, great-nephew of Captain Bartlett James, one of the battalion's white officers who managed to restrain a larger number of soldiers from leaving camp, but died under mysterious circumstances before the court-martial, notes James, who has researched the history. The unit had 60 years of excellent service, was full of experienced veterans, but couldn't endure 7 weeks of Houston. Now, what that says to me is that what they had to deal with was unbearable. Okay? And think about it. How bad did things have to be for these soldiers to up and go into town with their guns and get into a shooting match with the civilians and the police? That's deep. That's something you can't just, dismiss. Let's see what the marker says. The marker says, Camp Logan. Soon after the United States entry into World War I in 1917, the U.S. Army established 34 training camps to prepare troops for warfare. Named for General John A. Logan, Mexican War and Civil War veteran, and U.S. Senator from Illinois, Camp Logan was established at this site on July 18, 1917, encompassing 7,600 acres of land. It consisted of a main camp, auxiliary remount depot, rifle range, artillery range, and drill grounds. During construction, members of the 3rd Battalion, 24th Infantry, black troops commanded by white officers, were assigned to the camp as guards and were stationed about a mile to the east. The black soldiers, August 13, 1917, armed revolt in response to Houston's Jim Crow laws and police harassment resulted in the camp's most publicized incident, the Houston Mutiny and Riot of 1917. Troops receiving training at Camp Logan, including the 33rd Division, composed of the Illinois National Guard, part of the 93rd Division, and other regular Army units following training, they went on to serve in battle in France in 1918. Camp Logan closed on March 20th, 1919. Part of the land later became Memorial Park, named in tribute to the soldiers who fought in Europe. So that marker really isn't for the black men who got hanged. Ain't that something? Yeah, that's cold-blooded. So I like I say that photograph has always haunted me. I shouldn't say haunted, but it's always, like I say, just bothered me, because the idea that the largest court martial or murder trial in U.S. military history occurred, and I never read one word of this in high school or elementary school or high school. And you would say, well, it happened in Texas. But here's the deal. I live in Chicago. The Illinois National Guard was involved and down there. And so there's a reason why it should, in my mind, should have been something in the Illinois history about that. Okay? But it's like so many things that occur in the United States history. They will just erase it. This was basically erased. Now, it just happens that there's a movie out now called The 24th. That is a movie, some of it based on the true story and some of it fictionalized, but it's about this incident. Some black folks are the ones that did the movie. So at least now, maybe the world might get to know about this incident more. I want to see the movie because I want to see how they lay out this trial, because if they don't show this trial, at least to some degree, about how huge it was and how they tried all these black men like that and then went and hanged 13 of them within a week of their being found guilty, that's lynch mob. That's what that is. That's lynch mob. When you sentence somebody this week and then you go hang them next week. So, again, so that you recall this forever, it was Houston, 1917. Houston, 1917, the 24th. So when you see that movie titled The 24th, know what it's about. And you can judge for yourself whether you think they do a good job or not. I just want us to know about and give honor to the black soldiers who not only were hanged, those who died in the event in the town, and those who were given life sentences, and those who were sentenced on all levels, and all the families. Look at this. Think about all the families who were involved, because you don't just, it's not just those soldiers, they're families. And in many cases, those families were shamed because their husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, nieces, nephews, they were hanged and they were put in prison, and they were charged with mutiny and murder, killing white people. Wow. Something to think about, right? Well, I appreciate you. I'm going to close out now, and I'll let you look at these faces a little bit longer, because to me it's important that we not forget that, number one, we learn about our people and then not forget them. And of course I say, no justice, no peace, no love, KNOW.